Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to your math lesson for today. For today, you will need your 5B textbook, your 5B workbook, paper, and pencil. So pause and go grab those things if you need to, and then come on back and join me. As I've been mentioning, fifth graders, these warm-up problems are really directly related to problems that you're going to be doing on your upcoming quarterly exam, your DDI, and so we're working to get ourselves ready for that. So today's word problem, I'm actually going to guide you through. I want you to work along with me as I'm working, and then in the future, I'll ask you to do it independently. So we're not going to pause today. We're just going to go through it together. But yes, I want you to be working along with me. So our problem says, Jose received $30 from his parents. He saved $15 and spent the rest on a book and a magazine. The book cost $9. How much less did the magazine cost? So you will not be able to underline, but I will. And on a test, you would do this if we were in person, I guess, but even in distance, it's hard to show this. But we'll do this and then we write our answer statement. So the magazine cost blank dollars less. And I'm saying less in all bold because I want to make it really clear. We're not asking how much did it cost, we're actually asking how much less did it cost. So similar to, this is a little bit like one of the problems that was on your quiz, I guess like a week ago. Yeah, about a week ago, a little over a week ago. But I would recommend having 3 unit bars for this, okay? So we know that he saved some, spent some on a book, spent some on a magazine. And I want to say 3 because this will help us to compare the difference, right? We're supposed to say less. And so when they're stacked, it makes it a lot easier to show the difference. So we know that he received $30. So that's going to go on the outside. That's the total amount. We also know that he saved $15, that he spent the rest on a book and a magazine. The book cost $9. And we're being asked not how much did he spend on the magazine, but how much less. So we want to find the difference between the book and the magazine, okay? So in order to do this, we do have to find out how much the magazine costs, but that's not going to be our answer, okay? That won't be the answer. So to find first, step 1 is to find how much the magazine costs, okay? So in order to do that, I'm going to add 15 and 9. That's the savings on the book. So we do 15 plus 9, which is 24. If the total is 30, then we want to subtract 30 minus 24, which is 6. So that tells us that the magazine costs $6. So now we should be able to figure out how much less the magazine is than the book. The book is $9, the magazine is $6. So how much less is the magazine? To make it really clear, we're going to say 9 minus 6 is 3. So the magazine cost $3 less. So again, this is very much the type of problem that would show up on a quarterly exam, on a quiz or a test. So if you're having a tough time, if this isn't making sense, then absolutely you should make sure that you're visiting office hours and asking for help on problems like this. So today's lesson, fifth graders, we're going to be getting into more work with our decimals. Specifically, we're going to be adding and subtracting decimals, okay? So part of what we need to consider is that the decimal point placement is really important when we're adding and subtracting decimals, okay? And I like to think about it like this, okay? If you owe me money and I'm collecting, right? Let's say you owe me $10, okay? And you decide to put the decimal point there. How much money are you giving me when you owe me $10? $1, okay? Or let's say you put it here. How much are you giving me? 10 cents, right? And so when we're looking at decimals and where the decimal point goes, this is why it matters, because $10 is very different than $1, is very different than 10 cents. So we have to make sure that the decimal point goes in the right place. And so what this means As we're looking at today's lesson, for adding and subtracting decimals, there's a big rule for adding and subtracting decimals, which is that we need to line up the decimal points. Okay? This isn't going to be true for all 4 operations, but for adding and subtracting, this is our big rule, is to line up our decimal points. Okay, that's how we're going to be sure that we're giving $10 instead of 1 or 10 cents or whatever. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that. There's also something that is helpful to know. And these are symbols that show up in math. So we all have seen the equal sign, and we know what that means. Right? And so if we're finding equals, this means we're finding the exact answer, okay? We also, especially when we're estimating, have probably seen this, which is saying that the answer is approximately that. It's about that. And so for today's work in your practice and in your workbook, you're going to be asked to do both. You're going to be asked to estimate an answer, and you're going to be asked also to find an exact answer. So this is what we use for our estimates. This is what we use for exact answers. And the reason we're estimating for today's work is that we want to make sure that we're following this rule, okay? So if we have an estimate, then we can see when we get our exact answer, are they pretty close, or am I way off by place values? Did I get like 100 and I was supposed to be getting like 10? And that's going to tell us that we made a mistake with our decimal points if our answer is way off. So we're going to be practicing with estimating and doing the addition. That'll be 2 parts of the same part, okay? So we're going to jump into your textbook, page 17. So go ahead, and maybe we'll start on page 16, I guess. And you guys can come with your paper and join me, work along with me. So you can see from this example here, right? They've lined up the decimal points. We can see that they're stacked, and that's really going to be our objective as we're working on our addition of decimals, okay? And potentially that means we're going to have to add some zeros in order to make that work, but we'll be able to do it. But you can see here, right? Our decimal points are stacked, and that's what I mean about lining up the decimal point. From there, the addition should follow all of our same addition rules. So 3 plus 4 is 7. 6 plus 8 is 14. We want to make sure we put a decimal point, so you see we have it all lined up all the way down to our sum. And now we add 1 and 2 is 3, plus 3 more is 6. So our answer here is 6 and 47 hundredths. Okay, which, look at that. We did the same thing there. Okay, subtraction, again, in terms of following the steps, as long as you have lined up your decimal points correctly, subtraction follows those same rules. We're just going to place value at a time. So 7 minus 3 is 4. And now we do 2 tenths minus 5 tenths, which we can't do. So we're going to have to regroup. So again, we're going to borrow 1 and move it over here. And then our 4 becomes a 3. From there, it's the same thing. 12 minus 5 is 7. We want to make sure our decimal point lines up. 3 minus 2 is 1. And so if you know that you tend to kind of not have very even or straightly drawn addition or subtraction problems, this is a great time to really push yourself to line these things up neatly so that you can make sure that your decimal point gets where it should be, right? And if you're writing your answers askew, then you end up putting your decimal point potentially in the wrong place. So you really want to use your best, most careful writing as you guys are working on these problems, okay? So we're just gonna kind of work our way through page 17 together, looking at these problems. And again, your place value sheet is going to be really useful as you're working on some of these problems as well. So we're asked for 1A to add 4 tenths to 4 and 536 thousandths. So first we want to express 4 tenths, right, as a decimal, 4 tenths. So now as we're adding 4, when we're doing our addition, I usually like to write whichever one has more digits on top, okay? But we're going to add 4/10 here, and we have to make sure our decimal points line up. So if we do this correctly, it's going to look like this, which is a little confusing. But remember, we can add zeros. These would typically be unnecessary zeros, but we can add them at the end in order to make our addition a little bit more straightforward. Now we add as usual. 6, 3, 9, decimal point, and 4. Okay. How about B? We're doing 3/1000. So it's not 3/10. It's not 3/100. It's 3/1000. So that's what we're going to add to 4 and 536 thousandths. And you'll see we're lining up our decimal point, and that's where our decimal point should be in our answer too. 6 plus 3 is 9. 3 plus 0 is 3. 5 plus 0 is 5. Our decimal points line up, and 4 plus 0 is 4. Now we're doing some subtraction. 1C subtraction. We're subtracting 2/100ths. So again, not 2/10, but 2/100ths. We're going to subtract 2/100ths. So 4 and 536 thousandths minus 2/100ths. And we're going to have to add an extra 0 at the end so that we have the right number of digits. You see our decimal points are stacked throughout. 6 minus 0 is 6. Remember, it's minus. 3 minus 2 is 1. 5 minus 0 is 5. And 4 minus 0 is 4. Let's try 1D. We're running out of a little bit of space. So again, 6/1000. It's not 6/10 or hundredths, but thousandths. So now we're going to subtract 6/1000. So we see we're lining up our decimal points. So 6 minus 6 is 0. 3 minus 0 is 3. 5 minus 0 is 5. And 4 minus 0 is 4. And now we see in this case we have what I've been calling an unnecessary 0 at the end. So we want to rewrite this now that we're at the end to get our answer to be 4 and 53 hundredths. So get rid of that 0 at the end there. Okay, so we have a ton of practice problems. Now, thinking about working through this, right? Again, just working on lining up our decimal points. I also want to say it's possible with some of these to be doing these in your head, right? If we're making sure to add the right place value, then you could probably do some of this in your head. But either way, you see that we're lining up our decimal point, right? Now we can do just our typical addition, starting with the rightmost digit. So 5 plus 0 is 5, 6 plus 0 is 6, 4 plus 2 is 6, and 2 plus 0 is 2. Let's try B. Again, lining up our decimal points. Our decimal point needs to be in the same place in the answer, so it's lined up. And then we subtract 2, 4, 2, and 3. Fifth graders, I'd like you to pause and try C and D, 2C and 2D. Then come on back and see how you did. So for 2C, as long as you lined up your decimal points correctly, you probably had to add a 0 there at the end, okay? Now you add, and you should have gotten 1 and 276 thousandths. For D, we're doing subtraction, so make sure you subtracted, and again, probably had to put a 7 at the end, but we subtract. We get 7, 2, 5, 4. So 4 and 527 thousandths. Okay, let's go through 2D and F, or 2E, I should have said, and F together. So again, we want to make sure we're lining up those decimal points, and from there, add as normal. Again, to F, lining up those decimal points. We switch to subtraction though, and from there we subtract as normal. So 1, 4, 0, 2. So we get 2 and 41 thousandths. Remember, this would not be considered an unnecessary 0 because it's in the middle of the decimal. Okay, go ahead and pause, 5th graders, and try 2G and 2H, and then come on back and see how you do. So we have to make sure we're lining up those decimal points really carefully. So I'm adding a couple zeros there so that I make sure to have all my place values lined up. From there, you do your addition as usual, and you get 6 and 106 thousandths. Hopefully for H, you remembered that we're subtracting. And we actually ended up here with some unnecessary zeros, so hopefully you rewrote this answer as 5 and 2/10. So again, these are good checkpoints, 5th graders, as you're solving these problems. If you're getting them correct, great. If you're not, that might be a good sign that you should go visit office hours in order to get a little bit of help. Okay, so number 4 is asking us about these missing number ideas, right? And so really thinking about this in terms of a number bond, right? If 1 is our whole and 46 hundredths is one of the parts of the number bond, then what's the other part? And looking at this, we should see, this is really just a subtraction problem to find out what goes here. So in order to find that answer, we're going to subtract. Subtract to find what goes with it, okay? You can see up here, they kind of put it without the decimal points, and that would work too. But really just from there, our subtraction goes as usual, okay? So we can't subtract this, so this becomes a 10. And then this becomes a 9, and this becomes a 0. Okay, so 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 4 is 5. So that tells us what goes here? 54 hundredths. Okay, so I should have said 4A. Okay, so let's try 4B then before we move on. So how are we going to solve this? This is really a subtraction problem. So we want to add a couple of zeros after a decimal point here so that we can subtract 31 hundredths. And again, we're going to have to do some regrouping to make this possible. 10 minus 1 is 9. 9 minus 3 is 6. So we end up with 69 hundredths. Okay. So now we're going to start working on adding this estimation part of things. And the reason that estimating helps is that if it gives us a good idea of whether or not our answer is pretty close. Okay, so we're going to work through number 7 together, and these in particular are going to be a lot like your practice and homework. Okay, so 7A. We're being asked to estimate and then find the value of. Again, I'm going to say this again. This is what you're supposed to be doing for your homework, estimating and finding the value of. So when you're estimating, I'm all about making it as simple as possible. Round easily, get a quick, easy answer. So if I'm doing an estimate, I would just round this to 2, this to 4. So our estimate is 6. Once you've done the estimate, now we want to go back and actually do the addition. Remembering our only rule, which is to line up that decimal point. So that means we might have to add some zeros along the way. From here, we do our addition. 0 plus 5 is 5. 4 plus 7 is 11. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6. So our actual answer is 6 and 15 hundredths. We check back with our estimate and say, hey, we did pretty great. Okay, so let's try B. Again, step 1 is to estimate. So make it simple. I'm going to round this to 9, this to 6, and we get 15. So now we go back and do our actual addition. Again, we're adding that 0 because we need to make sure our decimal points line up. 1 plus 0 is 1. 6 plus 2 is 8. 8 plus 6 is 14. We compare, and I say, you know, those are pretty close. I think that's a good estimate. So go ahead and pause, fifth graders. Try, see yourself, and again, make it as simple as possible. And what I mean by that is when you're estimating, I would round that to 50. Make it simple. You want to have your estimate be something you pretty much could do in your head. So as you're rounding, if I were you, I would have rounded 50 and 20 to get an estimate of 70. And again, this is helpful because we're going to find, is our answer close to 70? Or is it like close to 700 or 7,000? Okay, if we get way out into like 700 or 7,000 or even 7, that means we have a decimal point problem. So that's our reference point. Then we go back and do our addition, making sure to line up our decimal points. From here, we can add 0 plus 8 is 8, 7 plus 6, 13, 1 plus 8 is 9, 4 plus 2 is 6. So now we have 69 and 38 hundredths. And again, that's pretty great. Our estimate is pretty close, okay? Okay, we're going to switch gears to subtraction, but again, we're estimating first, and again, we're making it simple. So for my estimate of subtraction, I would do 10 minus 8 is 2, okay? Now we do the actual subtraction, making sure to line up our decimal points. And we have to do a little bit of regrouping here, but that's all right. Our 2 becomes a 12. Our 8 becomes a 7. 12 minus 3 is 9. Looks like we're going to have to do a little regrouping again, so that 7 becomes a 17, and our 9 becomes an 8. 17 minus 9 is 8. Make sure we have that decimal point lined up. 8 minus 7 is 1. So we compare and say, yeah, that's a pretty great estimate there, okay? Let's try 1E together, and then I'll have you do 1F on your own. Okay, so again, estimate, keep it simple. So 10 minus 5, we get 5. Now we go back and do the actual subtraction, making sure that we line up those decimal points, okay? We cannot subtract this, so we're going to have to do some regrouping to make it work. Now, 10 minus 9 is 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. 10 minus 5 is 5. We compare and say, yeah, we did a pretty great job. Now again, this is where it's helpful. Let's say I misplaced my decimal point. Let's say I put my decimal point here and I got an answer that was 51 and an estimate of 5. That would tell me, you have a decimal point problem. Or if I get an answer of 511, that also tells me I need to go back and double check my decimal points. Okay, so this is where our estimate is useful. Okay, so I'm going to have you pause, fifth graders. Try F on your own. Again, make this an easy, simple, sweet estimate, and then come on back and see how you did. So if I'm trying to make this estimate as simple as possible, I would probably do something like 60 minus 5, or even 60 minus 6, you could probably still do in your head. So your estimate should have been like 54, 55, somewhere around there, okay? Then you want to go back and do your actual subtraction. Adding that 0 will help, okay? Lining up those decimal points straight on down. 2 minus 0 is 2. We can't do this subtraction, so we regroup. 11 minus 9 is 2. Again, can't do this subtraction, so we regroup. 12 minus 5 is 7. 5 minus 0 is 5. And we compare and say, yeah, that's pretty good. 54 and 57, yeah, they're not exactly the same. But again, those are close. We're looking at 50s. That's really what we're focusing on. Because again, if we had 5, if we put our decimal point here and our answer was 5, that's very different. Or 572 or 5,722, right? All of those are going to indicate that we have a decimal point problem. So, fifth graders, our big rule for today when we're adding and subtracting, make sure we're lining up those decimal points. It should go straight on down in your vertical problem and straight on down to your answer. Today's a little different in terms of that practice work and that homework. All of it is going to be page 8. Oh, wait, that's wrong. Misunderstood. I was prepping for another lesson. I'm sorry, fifth graders. Practice is an attached sheet, okay? An attached sheet that's going to ask you guys to be working. It's going to ask you to estimate and find the exact answer of your problems. Okay, so there's two parts of it, and we're going to see those two symbols, the straight lines, which mean equals, and those sort of swirly or wavy lines, which means approximately. So that's when you're going to estimate. Your homework then is going to be workbook page 8. You're going to do the whole thing in your workbook and submit a picture of that. Workbook page 8. The top is asking you to just do exact answers. That's number 1. And then the second part, you're going to estimate and then find the actual answer, kind of doing more of what we were just working on. I'm going to encourage you to really pay attention as you're doing the work. When is it an addition sign? When is it a subtraction sign? Because that's going to help you as you're solving these problems, okay? So you're at checkpoint 1. Once you do that practice, that's going to be checkpoint 2 to see if it would be helpful for you to go visit office hours and ask for a little bit of additional help. But when you're feeling confident and ready, you're going to go ahead and work on your homework and submit a picture. Okay, let us know if you have questions. Good luck.